Good evening. On Soni Irabor Live tonight, we will be focusing on Nigeria. Well, Nigeria has been through everything, okay? It has experienced war, and I think in a way it's still experiencing bits and pieces of war. It's been grappling and battling with the rule of law and how it should be handled. And leadership is not a problem per se, except that leaders are finding it difficult to relate with the led, those as the citizens of the country, and then also the citizens of the country are expecting better from leadership. Now, who is to blame? This country belongs to all of us, I know, but also is a country that came all the way from 1914 to 1960, became a republic in 1963, and has grown over time. So we expect that, like America or UK, we must be growing for the better, overcoming our problems, and then expecting that leadership should be serving the people, not the other way around. I'm not making statements that are judgmental. I believe I'm trying to fashion a direction to this discourse because I want to see that there's one person who should be able to discuss this matter with us because of the age of Nigeria and the fact that he has enjoyed public service, he has enjoyed corporate service, he has also enjoyed international service on behalf of Nigeria. I'm talking of Dr. Christopher Kolade. He was my boss at the beginning, and I tell you, I'm so glad to have him here, even though I'm a bit flustered. Sir, Your Excellency, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad to be here. It's good to be back on this kind of scene because it reminds one of a few things.
Yes, okay.
So, yeah.
They say once a broadcaster, always a broadcaster.
I think so, because what I discovered with broadcasting is that you cannot do excellent work unless you involve the whole of yourself. And therefore, if you've done that, it continues to live with you for the rest of your life.
What was civil service like in your time?
Well, you know, civil service, let me just locate it because I joined the civil service in the middle 50s.
50s?
Yes.
Okay.
And that was the time that Nigeria was getting ready for independence.
Okay.
And therefore, opportunities were available for anyone who was willing to work hard because expatriates were leaving and Nigerians were expected to fill those places and to perform even better than the expatriates if they could. So it was a challenging time. But you see, for the human spirit, especially at the age of 20-something, you get this adrenaline in you that says, if I need to do this to prove something to somebody, let's go to it.
So merit was it?
Oh yes. What I remember is that they didn't offer you anything that was based on consideration of where you came from or who you knew or something. You had to show what you could do. And if you showed what you could do and they thought it was good,
Yes.
then the doors were opened.
Now, when did things start to change?
Well, things started to change when, in my view,
Yes.
this is my personal view, when the people who went into politics as opposed to civil service went into politics, discovered that they also had some challenges. Now, how did they decide to meet those challenges? The political culture is one in which you're looking for support from
the
people.
Okay.
And what you give them to secure their support may not necessarily be your performance.
That's pregnant, sir.
Yes. If you can offer them something that they think is good for them or is worth their while, it didn't seem to matter how you performed. You could, I mean, even today, as you can see, there's a lot of exchange of money in politics.
But it wasn't this rife then,
No,
was it?
it was not this rife at the time. But at the time, you see, once there are opportunities for, say, jobs, for instance, opportunities for enterprise, if somebody could open the doors for you, he became somebody that was valuable to you. Now, therefore, relationships rather than performance became very important. Who do you know? Who do your parents know? And so on. Now, the danger in that is that if you go down that route, you may find that you come to rely less and less on what this person can actually do, what this person can contribute. Because even when they're not contributing anything that is worthwhile, they have someone that is supporting them in the background. And if they're going to get into any kind of trouble for not performing, somebody can always speak up for them. So standards began to be diluted and therefore to decline. And I personally blame the kind of politics that we practiced. Because politics is not necessarily like that everywhere.
Yes.
But when you have a political situation where you don't really have to produce anything of value, provided you know the right people, then of course standards fall.
Wow. What I understand from what you've said just shows that standards started falling, but there was no attempt to correct things.
Well, even if anyone attempted to correct things, because the goalposts had shifted and the criteria for assessing quality had moved. And therefore, if you tried to insist on standards and quality and so on, you soon found yourself going against the grain, because what was working was not based on those considerations.
Wow. Okay, we're coming back to this later.
Yes, sure.
Corporate service. Let's, before we even do that, I think the viewer needs to understand the fact that Dr. Christopher Kolade was in the civil service or public service, and he became Director General of the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation. Was it in your time changed to Federal Radio Corporation?
No. They waited for me to leave before they changed.
It was soon after you left, actually.
It was immediately after I left.
Yes. Okay. And then you were there. You were there for 5 years?
I was Director General for just over 5 years. It's 5 years and 4 months or something. And it was, I mean, I had never seen myself occupying a position like that for much longer than that. In fact, I actually gave myself 5 years. And just after 5 years, I moved on to something else.
Okay. Before we get to where you moved on to,
yes,
I just want to recount an experience that I read about or heard.
Yes.
A play that was broadcast.
Oh, yes.
You know.
Yes.
Was this a play written by Rashid Badamasi?
Written by Rashid Badamasi, first produced on stage by Eldred Fiberesima.
Okay.
And then produced on radio by Kofo Bakna-Wakere.
Oh my goodness, who became Deputy Governor.
Yes.
Wow. Now, I bring this story because of what happened. There was a coup announcement in that story, in that play.
Well, it was a
take it from there. Yes.
Simulation.
Okay.
A coup announcement. And this was being broadcast at 2 p.m. on a Sunday.
Okay.
Now, 2 p.m. on a Sunday, a lot of people are listening to radio, at least were in those days listening to radio.
Yes.
And apparently quite a few, and don't forget, we were in a military government.
Yes.
So
it was Gowon's time, right?
Yes, very, very, very important to remember that.
Yes.
So people were listening to this, and we had come through a recent history of successful coups.
Ah.
Coups that actually succeeded. So when this announcement was made
Which was
in
part
this,
of a play.
in this play,
Uh-huh.
those who were listening and who had not received the information that we were going to listen to a play,
Yes.
thought they were listening to reality.
Oh.
And so even members of government, of military government, thought a coup was taking place. And so you can imagine, on a Sunday afternoon, you think a coup is happening, you take evasive action, and you do all kinds of things only to find
That was
that this was only a play.
program.
Yes.
I don't want to say what happened thereafter, but I think it was not very pleasant.
Well, look, you couldn't really blame the people in authority for, when they discovered that this was only a play, but in the meantime they had done some things which they would normally do if a coup was taking place, including self-protection and things like that. Now they became a bit angry. Angry that they had been led down the garden path to do all of this, and it was not necessary. And when you make military people angry, you can expect to be visited with some unpleasantness.
Oh my goodness. Okay, we'll take a short break now, and when we get back, we get to the other side of Dr. Christopher Kolade. Yes, we were discussing public service, and we had some encounters in how programming can actually affect people's lives and all that. But let's now move to Dr. Christopher Kolade's corporate encounters, let me put it that way.
Yes.
One I remember vividly is the fact that you became chairman, CEO of Cadbury, Nigeria PLC.
Yes, indeed, yes.
And you were there for a long time.
Well, I was on the board of Cadbury Nigeria for 24 years.
Oops. Yes,
So, and I moved from being a director of administration, and then became deputy managing director, and then managing director, chief executive, chairman, went through the whole thing in those 24 years.
Now, if you look at public service
Yeah.
and corporate service, do you see a difference of sort that one can learn from?
Oh, yes. You see, I think one of the things we do not understand or we do not remember
Yes.
is that when you are working for a business organization, everything you do must, as far as possible, be contributing something to that business, to the success of the business. So for every decision you take, every minute you spend, there is some value that you are either creating or destroying, depending on what you're doing. There's no external party that is supporting you with funds. You are creating something, creating value, marketing it, selling it, and realizing revenue from it. That's the drill. So if you fail to do what you should do, if you do it to inferior quality, you don't get as much revenue as you should get. And therefore, the success of the enterprise is under a question mark. In public service, it doesn't matter what you do or don't do. The funding is coming from taxes and tariffs and things like that, which have been specified in some law or the other. So even if you do nothing, the money comes in. And when the money comes in, how you then dispose it is governed by the fact that you know that even if you don't use that money to create value, more money will come.
So there's no test, there's no, you're not given a chance to now say, look, I have a responsibility to perform well.
And it's natural that if your survival does not depend on what value you create,
Yes.
then of course the urge to create superior value becomes weak.
Now, there's something here. I don't know whether it's the Americans or the English that used to say is a catch-22. It's a phrase. The danger of that is that public service governs overall the country.
Yes.
Corporate service operates within the country. And the rules of law, I believe, is important for all of us to obey.
Yeah.
So, where is the teaching point in all of this?
Well, let's look at reality.
Yes, sir.
In the 60s, 70s, government got involved in the management of some enterprises.
Okay.
Government would set up hotels or places where you are supposed to render service which people are going to pay for. And they tend to pay, especially to pay repeatedly if the service meets their expectations.
Okay.
Therefore, if you think back to the history of those enterprises at the time, you'll find that they never really did very well. Whereas hotels and other things set up by private business did excellently because they had to earn their income. Now, that is why, to start with, government started creating corporations, saying to themselves, if we create a corporation which now uses the methods of private business to run their businesses, this may be the way out. But in fact, the point is that when you create a corporation and then you make that corporation, the management of the corporation, report to a ministry.
Who doesn't understand
The ministry is on a different
wavelength.
kind of thing altogether. They're not interested in the value you create. They're simply interested in the formal processes that you go through. So, for instance, when you make your budget, and I can tell you a funny story about this.
Yes.
We made a budget in Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation and said, we need, let's say 15 million naira to run our affairs for this year. And this was after I became the Director General, and I went to the Ministry of Finance to defend my estimates, as we used to call them. And I got there, and after we had discussed for about an hour, the chairman of that estimates committee actually said, for all to hear, he said, look, Mr. Kolade, you have defended your budget very well. In fact, we cannot find any loopholes in this budget. You've made a good case for everything you've requested. But you see, you're looking for 15 million. Our authority doesn't give you more than 9 million. So you'll have to make do with 9 million.
Just like that?
Just like that. They actually...
Is it that the money wasn't there,
Well,
or they didn't recognize the importance of what you were
The point was that government had decided how much they were going to devote to that particular enterprise. And so the man said to me, all we can give you is 9 million. We're sorry, but that's all we can give you. And then I said, okay, since we made a case and you agree that we made a good case for 15 million, you can only give us 9 million, then it means that what we produce, which is programs on the air, will have to be tailored to 9 million.
I like that. I like that.
And it means that instead of opening the station at 5:30 in the morning, we won't open until 9. Ooh. Instead of shutting down at 12 midnight, we'll shut down at 9 p.m. and so on. And when this became known in government, they said I was blackmailing government.
What?
Yes. And I said, no, listen, you have agreed that my budget, that I justified every request I made. You cannot give me more than 9 million. So how can I produce what I wanted to produce, 15 million, with 9 million? It's not possible. So I'm saying to you, if 9 million is all I get, this is all you get.
And how did it end up?
Well, after I'd been accused of blackmailing government and so on, and whatever it was, I got my 15 million.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Now that's the point. So if I use that example to try and survive, as it were, the state of things the way it is today in Nigeria, would that be a wise move?
Well, you know, unfortunately, I'm not totally familiar with the details of how things go on now. But the principle for me remains the same.
Okay.
That if you give someone a responsibility and you promise that to fulfill this responsibility, I will give you what you need, and then they come to you and say, this is what we need, and you examine it, you tear it to shreds, but at the end you discover that's what they need, then you have no excuse for offering something lower. And if you offer something lower, you must expect lower result.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if today is in any way different, I beg to say that the principle you cannot negotiate that principle. You give me less than I need, less than you have agreed that I need, then you must expect less from me.
All right, I'm going to take you to that point where you had some services provided, to the government, as it were. There was a short P. Then there was being the Nigerian High Commissioner to the UK. These are areas, when your name is mentioned, everybody sits up because we're talking about integrity, a man of principles and all of that. Did you at any time feel as if you were dealing with people who didn't have the interest of Nigeria at heart, but then you had no choice but to perform? What was?
No, I always reminded myself that I can never be in a position where I have no choice. Because the choice to continue to work on something is mine.
True.
And if I don't want to do it anymore, I can say goodbye. So I always have a choice. I've always had a choice. But the point is this, that at certain points you would have to ask yourself, what is possible in this situation? You know what you want to do,
yes,
but what is it that you can actually do successfully? Because there's no point shutting the whole thing down simply because somebody is blocking your way. Therefore, what can you achieve here?
Okay, we'll leave it at that question, go on a short break and be right back. What can you do? How did you put it again?
What can you achieve?
What can you achieve?
In this situation?
We'll be right back after the break.
Make your event a memorable one with captivating and well-organized event center at Lagos Television's prestigious Blue Roof with a capacity of more than 3,000 seats and a fully air-conditioned 750 seats combo hall capacity. Suitable for annual general meetings, government functions, exhibitions, religious activities, wedding ceremonies, burials, musical show, and many more in a well-secure environment. Spacious car park, uninterrupted power supply, and impeccable facilities. Take advantage of all of these at affordable rates.
For inquiries, please call 0808 252 8742 or 0802 282 9898.
Lagos Television Event Center, a tasteful event center for your delight.
When you're faced with a benchmark and you're faced with a ceiling, this is what you can do within which, this is what you have, and this is what you can do with what you have. So many questions arise from there. And Dr. Christopher Kolade, a man that I have talked to you about in so many ways, and a man who has proved his ethos? Is here, and I'm overwhelmed just having him by my side. The question you asked just now, sir.
Yes.
So, how do you answer that question?
All right, so if you're going to produce anything,
Yes.
say a service to people, now there are certain ways of measuring what you're producing.
Yes.
First, there is the quantity, the volume of what you're offering.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also the quality of what you're offering.
Mm-hmm.
There's the what I call the cost effectiveness of what you're offering.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, are you getting value for money? Mm-hmm. All right? There is also the issue of timeliness. If you say you're going to do something and you don't manage to do it within the time that it is needed, then it becomes useless to everybody. So you've got these yardsticks for measuring what you're producing.
Yes.
Now, you can compromise on volume. You can say, I thought I was going to give you 10 tons of this, but with all I have, I can only give you 5.
Okay.
But you must not compromise on quality.
Quality.
Whatever it is, however little you now manage to produce, must not be inferior to the quality that you promised to produce. Now, timeliness is also something you should try not to negotiate, because if it comes after the time it could be useful, then it's no use to anybody. Cost effectiveness is key, because the reason why you're even looking at this at all is that the money you thought you were going to have, you now don't have. So, but for every kobo you spend, you must be able to assure yourself that you're getting value for money. Now, if you go on those principles, then it becomes important that the other people who are collaborating with you on this particular endeavor also understand that you will compromise on volume if necessary, but that there are certain issues you will not negotiate away. And one of those is quality. So when people talk about integrity, integrity really means that you are going to stand by the quality that you promised to deliver. Yes, and that you're going to pay whatever price you have to pay to maintain that quality.
I bring it right now into politics.
Yes.
I decide to run for government. I decide, then I succeed. So I have a responsibility, therefore, to perform to the best of my ability, given the right environment and all of that. What can politics and can politicians learn from the analogies you've given tonight?
First of all, politicians have to understand and show that they understand that politics is not an end game. It is supposed to help us to move ourselves to governance. Politics is a place where we prepare all the things we need to prepare, including people, so that we can have good governance. Now, therefore, it's important for a politician to ask himself or herself, if I enter this race, if I contest for this office, what am I going to contribute at the end of it? Why am I doing this? Because if you're entering public office, which is a political office,
Yes.
and you don't have in your focus the best interest of the nation and its people, if you have any other interest that is distracting you from there, then you're going to fail. I have no reluctance in saying that, because if you don't know what you're supposed to deliver, or if you're not committed to delivering what you're supposed to deliver, if you allow yourself to be distracted along the way by interests that are either personal, self-centered, or based on some other narrow interests that now threaten the national interest, it is going to fail.
So how can the average Nigerian who is a stakeholder in this whole scheme of things, how can he get his own back? When I say get his own back, I mean he puts you there, he expects some value.
I'll share an experience with you.
Yes.
I have a small group that I talk to because they think more or less the same way that I do. So we communicate very well. Before the 2011 elections,
Yes.
we tried something. So we saw candidates who were vying for office, political office, and we invited them to chat with our group. And we said, now you're going to, but what is it you're going there to do? What should we expect from you? And they made us some very glowing promises. And said, this is what we shall do, and so on and so forth. Fine. Then they got into office. And about a year after they got into office, we invited them and said, now, can you come and chat with us? Let's look at what you have done related to what you said you were going to do and see what conclusions we come to. They all, without exception, were too busy to come and see us.
Say that again?
Yes, every single one of them said they were too busy to come and chat with us. So you see, what can the ordinary person do? You can create situations where you want people to become accountable. And they will, for as long as they're looking for your vote, they will promise that they will be accountable to you.
But to them, promises are made to be broken.
But by the time they get there, and maybe it is the experience they have there that makes them think that accountability is no longer important.
Wow. So, lesson learned. What's your advice?
My advice is that we should set up a system whereby accountability is not just it's not an option. It's not something you agree or not agree to do. We set up a system that says after 9 months or 12 months, whatever it is, you must return to give an account of what you did, and that account must enable us to judge whether what you have done comes anything close to what you said you were going to do. And there may be a gap, but you have to be able to explain why there is a gap.
Dr. Christopher Kolade Foundation is something that is dear to your heart.
Yes.
And it says the three powerful key points of the foundation are contributing to the attainment of educational excellence, ethical leadership, and interfaith harmony.
Yes.
First, you coined these phrases eloquently, effortlessly.
And
you must have thought of it.
And I'll tell you why.
Yes.
Now, I believe that one of the reasons why standards sometimes fall, why people who are managing situations may be deficient in what they do is that the people they are responding to are not, they're not using the education that they have to manage their relationship with the people in responsibility. So instead of tackling people like that and challenging them on issues of principle and issues of the time,
Yes.
the discussion goes into all kinds of things, and we talk to each other as if we have no education. Therefore, I believe that education is important. Now, as far as, you know,
Leadership,
leadership,
ethical leadership.
ethical leadership is concerned,
Yes.
you know, I don't think that even the worst of us believes that leadership is just something you walk into and walk out of. Leadership is meant to show the way, to lead into the way, and to keep things up. Leadership is actually custodianship. Something of value has been given to you, and you've been made a leader of it.
Yes.
One of your responsibilities, maybe even your principal responsibility, is to make sure that the quality of that thing does not deteriorate. That you keep up the standards, which is what I call custodianship. It must not fall while, under my watch. As far as interfaith harmony is concerned, now, you know, it is clear to us that people relate to their maker in different ways.
Yes.
It doesn't matter which way you choose or which way you're born into, which way you inherit. The point is that the way you relate to your maker is what is important. This maker has expectations of you. He has made you, he's given you resources, he's given you opportunities, and he's done all kinds of things for you. He wants you to work in such a way that his purpose for the world, his purpose for your community will not be frustrated. And therefore you have to think deeply about, how do I work so that God is pleased? Now, you can do that as a Muslim, you can do that as a Christian, you can do that in any faith.
Yes.
But the point is that all faiths, as far as I know, all faiths want to relate to Almighty God. That is the unifying factor. And therefore, if we promote interfaith harmony, if we bring human beings to the point where they acknowledge that they're trying to relate to the same God
Yes.
through their own different ways, let us harmonize that so God will be pleased. That's the idea.
Okay, so let us look at how Nigeria will move to the next level. Meanwhile, we'll take a short break. We'll be right back. Okay, sir, Dr. Christopher Kolade, I'm so glad that I was able to capture your time and attention.
Well,
And we have your attention.
Yes, don't forget that you and I keep insisting, you and I were colleagues in broadcasting.
Yes, sir.
Therefore, we owe each other something.
That's true. Now, let's look at political climate in Nigeria.
Yes.
And way forward. Then we look at the youth. Those we can do within 4 minutes. How do we see the Nigerian political climate?
Well, I've been trying to say this, that
yes,
politics is meant to lead to something. Therefore, taking part in politics, becoming a party politician, must have a purpose.
true.
Now, these party politicians must be able to agree on the purpose that
Yes.
they go there
Yes.
to serve.
Yes.
Because that purpose is to make sure we have good governance in Nigeria. Now, therefore, if we were to start tomorrow to operate our politics on that basis, we would, and one of my recommendations, which I have failed to succeed with, is that when someone actually wins an election to a public office, a political office, we must put them through at least a 2-week period of training. Training where they understand what this is all about, what is expected of them. Well, I think it is, but I have not managed to sell it to anybody yet.
No, I think the media owes it a duty to let the world know and let the politicians themselves know that this is sine qua non.
And you see,
It's very
sending
important.
somebody for training is not to say you don't know what you want to do. It's simply to remind you and to make sure that all of you who have won this election, who are going to have to work together, have the same exposure
Yes.
to this training, so that when things begin to fall apart, you can remind one another, hey, that's not what they told us during the training. So that's my belief about politics for the future.
What about the youth?
Well, you
Now,
know,
before even you answer,
Yes.
sir, let me just look at the youth. I've had different guests say the youth, they've lost faith in adults, in leadership. The youths are feeling used. The youths are apathetic. You know, all
well,
kinds of things.
let me
Yes.
say my.
Yes.
I also talk to some youth from time to time.
Okay.
And I say to them, you come to me and say, oh, your generation got it wrong. You did it badly and so on. So that is why we are not making progress. And I say to them, but that is not very wise, because if I got it wrong and you now line up behind me to take the punishment for my getting it wrong, then what role are you playing?
Whoa.
What contribution are you making? You see that I've got it wrong, show how it can be got right, and do something about it. And you know, the youth nowadays, they know a lot more than I did at their age. They have IT, they have all kinds of things. Use those things to, one example that I'll give you if you have time,
Yes.
is that I say to, you know, until recently when a senator said this is how much money we take home, we all didn't know. We were all in the dark. And I say to the youth of today, some of you have got degrees, you've got master's degrees where you have to do research. Why don't you do some research into this subject? The information is somewhere.
Yes.
Dig it out. Let everybody know this is how much money we spend in Senate and House of Reps.
And the balancing act is in holding them accountable
Absolutely.
for the responsibility.
Now you
we're
show
giving them.
this is the information. Now you can ask them, explain
Exactly.
why you think that this is justified.
Sir, Nigeria seems very promising, but at the same time, many people feel that Nigeria is on the precipice.
No, let me tell you what I think.
Yes.
You see, if you roll it back many, many years, to even before independence, the people who lived at that time, the people who were the youth of those days, I mean, the Awolowo's, the Zeeks and so on didn't start at 60. They started when they were young. Now, something motivated them to do the things they did. What is the motivation today? If the youth of today perceive that things are wrong, do they have sufficient knowledge? I think they do. Do they have sufficient motivation. I think they can get it. What are they lacking? Why can't they take the situation and say, well, this is what we think we can do? And incidentally, I believe that there are some young people in this country who are doing excellent things, but we don't get to hear about them. We don't get to celebrate them. And so they do these things and it's all kept in the quiet. The biggest noise is corruption and all kinds of things. So let's correct that.
Okay.
Let's showcase the young people who are doing good things.
Okay, we've had a very quality time with Dr. Christopher Kolade, and I'm hoping out there that you, being my guest, or rather my audience, you had so much value from what we've discussed so far. Feel free to send your observations to our email and our social media handles. I'm sure by the time you do that, we'll be able to respond to you. So thank you so much.
No, I have to thank you
for coming on the show. And I'm really pleased. And I think Nigeria, this is where you say a man of this caliber deserves some extra accolade, as you say.
Thank you very much. These days I keep myself very quiet. So, but I appreciate the opportunity of being able to share some views with you.
Please don't stay too quiet, sir. Thank you so much indeed. And okay, we'll call it a day now. Soni Irabor Live signing off. And next week is another day. Bye-bye now.